Battlefront Publishing presents Shadows of Valor. Written by James Krieger and Adolf Riker. Performed by Thomas Richter. Chapter 7. The way of the ninja is to know one's place in the shadow and in the light, to use each for its proper purpose. Ancient Arashikage teaching. August 3rd, 1945, 0247 local time. Hiroshima Prefecture, Empire of Japan. The mass grave lay like an open wound in the mountainside. Nightblade counted 117 bodies in the shallow pit. Korean laborers, Chinese conscripts, Filipino prisoners, even two faces that looked American beneath the grime and starvation. All had died building the Emperor's war machine. Their indigo work clothes hung loose on skeletal frames, cotton fabric stained with mud and worse things. White lime powder dusted the corpses like snow, meant to speed decomposition, but the pit remained uncovered until enough bodies filled it to justify burial. Beyond the pit, a field of covered mounds stretched down the hillside, dozens of identical humps marking where previous loads of industrial dead had been interred without ceremony or marker. Shadow Dancer kept watch from the tree line, her breathing synchronized with the mountain wind. Below them, the burial detail had finished their grim work hours ago, shoveling the lime over industrial casualties with mechanical efficiency. No ceremonies, no prayers, just disposal of used resources. That one, Quicklock pointed to a corpse near the pit's edge. Similar build, no bullet holes. The dead Korean had been young once, maybe 25 before starvation and forced labor aged him beyond recognition. His work uniform was standard issue, cotton shirt, canvas trousers, rope sandals. The kind of outfit that would make Nightblade invisible among 4,000 living prisoners. The smell will sell the disguise, Shadow Dancer observed grimly. Death and factory smoke. They'll expect it on someone from the camps. Nightblade descended into the pit, moving with surgical precision. He stripped the corpse efficiently, folding the reeking garments, machine oil, human desperation, and that particular stench of men worked to death. He knelt beside the naked body, closing staring eyes with calloused fingertips. The mission demanded pragmatism, but respect cost nothing. "Patrol incoming," Quicklock reported, voice barely a whisper. "Squad strength. 4 guards, Type 38 rifles, following the burial road." Nightblade climbed from the pit, stolen clothes bundled against his chest. Timing. 3 minutes to contact point. Quicklock's eyes tracked movement through the trees. Standard route. They inspect the burial details work, then return to camp for morning rotation change. The patrol materialized from morning mist, 4 Japanese soldiers walking with bored efficiency, Sergeant Stripes and Katana on the leader, 3 enlisted behind, all armed, alert enough to pose danger but not expecting resistance in this charnel house. Nightblade pressed his face into damp earth, pine needles scraping his cheek like broken glass. 5 yards left, Quicklock had melted into boulder shadow, breathing masked by wind through dead branches. Shadow Dancer crouched behind a fallen log 30 feet upslope, silhouette invisible against gray dawn. The patrol's boots crunched through summer-dried grass, leather soles on regulation hobnails, each step marking time like a metronome. The sergeant carried his Type 38 at port arms, bolt action gleaming with gun oil despite the mountain cold. His breath misted in the cool morning air, white puffs dissipating into morning fog. "Inspection complete," the sergeant announced in crisp Japanese. His voice carried the authority of a man accustomed to being obeyed without question. The burial detail followed protocol. One of the enlisteds kicked at the lime-dusted pit with his boot toe. White powder clouded up, mixing with his breath vapor. "More next week, Sergeant-san. The factory is pushing quotas again." "Always more." The sergeant's tone carried no emotion. Death was paperwork. Bodies were inventory. "The Emperor's war machine requires fuel." Pine sap stuck to Nightblade's palm where he gripped earth. The resin smelled sharp and clean, nothing like industrial death below. The sergeant's gaze swept over Nightblade's position, held for 2 heartbeats, moved on. Quick Lock's breathing synchronized with the mountain wind, each exhale timed to match natural sounds. His fingers rested loose on his Tanto's handle, ready but not tense. The blade stayed sheathed. 4 guards meant noise if steel came out. Noise meant reinforcements from the factory compound 2 miles down the mountain. "The new work detail arrives today," another corporal reported. 50 fresh laborers from Harbin. The commandant wants them processed before evening shift. "Fresh meat for the grinder." The sergeant adjusted his rifle sling, worn leather creaking in the cold. "How long do they estimate this batch will last?" 3 months if we maintain current quotas. Less if Tokyo increases production demands. Shadow Dancer shifted minutely, redistributing weight as numb legs threatened cramps. Her position offered clear lines of sight to all 4 guards, but attacking meant exposing herself across 30 feet of open ground. Too far, too risky. The mission required patience, not heroics. The patrol spent another 5 minutes inspecting the burial site, checking lime distribution, confirming body counts against their ledger, marking positions for the next mass grave when this one reached capacity. Administrative precision applied to industrial murder. Finally, the sergeant nodded satisfaction. "Return to barracks. Morning rotation begins in 30 minutes. The 4 guards shouldered their rifles and marched back up the mountain road. Their voices faded into distance, swallowed by wind and the rustle of dying leaves. Bootsteps echoed off stone outcroppings, gradually diminishing until only natural sounds remained. Nightblade waited another 10 minutes before moving. Standard procedure. Patrols sometimes doubled back, but the mountain road stayed empty except for morning mist rising from warming earth. He rose from concealment like smoke given form, pine needles falling from his black clothing like shed scales. Quick Lock emerged from his boulder shadow, Tanto still sheathed but hand resting on the grip. Shadow Dancer descended from her overwatch position, feet finding purchase on loose scree without disturbing a single stone. "Clear," Shadow Dancer confirmed, scanning approaches with eyes trained to spot movement at impossible distances. No secondary patrol, no observers. Nightblade retrieved the bundle of stolen clothes from where Quick Lock had cached them behind a moss-covered tree trunk. The dead Korean's uniform reeked of machine oil, human sweat, and institutional despair. Cotton fabric worn thin by industrial labor, patched with mismatched thread where factory work had torn it. "The disguise will hold," Quick Lock assessed, examining the uniform's details. "Work crews rotate constantly. Guards expect new faces." Shadow Dancer pulled a folded map from her pack, spreading it against the fallen log's bark-stripped surface. Her finger traced routes marked in pencil: the mountain labor camp, the transport road, Hiroshima's factory district. Intelligence gathered through weeks of observation. "Safe house is operational," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "Boarding house in the Ujina district. War widow cover identity established 3 days ago. Landlady assumes I'm another factory worker's widow seeking employment." Nightblade studied the convoy route details. The labor camp rotated prisoners at dawn, 30 men per truck, names checked against rosters. But the factory only counted bodies for work assignments, not individual verification. "Transport security?" Quick Lock asked, examining the route's elevation changes. 2 guards in each truck cab, driver and shotgun. Shadow Dancer's finger traced the winding road. "Truck beds are open, unguarded. Prisoners packed too tight to cause trouble, or so they assume." Nightblade examined the forged papers Shadow Dancer produced from her pack. Korean work permits, medical clearances, even camp transfer orders. The documents bore authentic-looking stamps and signatures aged with tea stains and careful handling. "These show transfer from Manchurian facility yesterday," she explained. "Paperwork confusion at the camp means you weren't on this morning's head count. By the time administration sorts it out, you'll be inside the factory system." Quick Lock tested the paper's texture between his fingers. Good weight, proper watermarks, convincing wear patterns. "What happens when they discover the discrepancy?" "Bureaucratic chaos works in our favor. Camp administrators blame factory clerks blame camp administrators." Shadow Dancer rolled the map carefully. Investigation takes weeks. We only need days. Nightblade stripped off his ninja garb with practiced efficiency, folding the black cotton into a compact bundle that disappeared into Shadow Dancer's pack. The stolen Korean uniform felt alien against skin accustomed to silk, rougher, heavier, imbued with its previous owner's suffering. "Insertion timing?" he asked, adjusting the uniform's loose fit. Shadow Dancer pointed to a section of road where ancient pines overhung the transport route. Trucks slow for the hairpin turn. Diesel engines mask sound. Guards in the cab can't see the truck bed from their position. They moved through morning forest toward the designated position. Pine needles muffled their footsteps as they descended the mountainside. The transport road carved a scar through virgin timber, gravel and crude asphalt laid by prisoner labor. The massive pine stood like a sentinel above the hairpin curve. Its lowest branches hung 12 feet over the roadway, thick enough to support a man's weight. Perfect natural bridge for their dangerous insertion. Shadow Dancer checked her watch against the convoy schedule. 35 minutes until trucks pass. Guards focus on driving the mountain road. Treacherous curves, steep grades. They won't be watching for aerial infiltration. "Contact protocols once inside?" Quicklock asked, testing handholds on the pine's bark. Shadow Dancer checked her watch against the convoy schedule. 35 minutes until trucks pass. Guards focus on driving the mountain road. Treacherous curves, steep grades. They won't be watching for aerial infiltration. "Contact protocols once inside?" Quicklock asked, testing handholds on the pine's bark. "Visual signals from the factory yard," Shadow Dancer replied, pulling colored silk ribbons from her pack. "Red ribbon on the oak tree near the main gate means mission proceeding normally. Blue means complications but manageable. White means abort and extract immediately." Nightblade examined the ribbons. Thin silk that would appear as decorative offerings, common enough around factory shrines to avoid suspicion. "Visibility from your position?" "Perfect line of sight from Gokoku Shrine's upper terrace. I conduct morning prayers facing the factory district." Shadow Dancer tucked the ribbons into Nightblade's uniform pocket. "Daily updates at dawn. Change ribbons during shift changes when guards rotate." Quicklock nodded understanding. "Emergency protocols if visual contact breaks?" "Dead drops at the shrine only if absolutely necessary. Too much risk otherwise." Shadow Dancer's voice carried professional finality. "Trust your training. Trust each other. Don't trust anything else." She moved closer to Nightblade, her expression softening for the first time since their mission began. In the growing dawn light, her features showed the strain of weeks spent preparing for this moment, the careful balance between professional necessity and personal attachment. "Come back to me," she whispered, reaching up to touch his face with calloused fingertips. "Both of you." Nightblade pulled her close, feeling the familiar warmth of her body against his chest. For a moment, they were not shadow warriors preparing for infiltration, just two people stealing a moment of connection before facing death. Her lips found his, soft and desperate, tasting of pine needles and morning mist. The kiss lasted only seconds but carried the weight of unspoken promises. When they separated, the professional mask had returned to Shadow Dancer's features, though her eyes still held traces of vulnerability. "Trucks approach," Quicklock reported quietly, having climbed higher to watch the road. 3 vehicles, diesel engines laboring up the grade. Shadow Dancer stepped back, shouldering her pack with practiced efficiency. "I'll observe the insertion from the ridgeline, then proceed to factory shift change. Establish your signals before evening." She melted into the forest, moving with silent precision toward an observation position 50 meters upslope. Nightblade watched her go, knowing she would remain hidden until confirming their successful boarding. Only then would she descend to Hiroshima and her dangerous masquerade. The sound of truck engines grew louder, 3 vehicles grinding through low gears as they climbed the mountain road. Diesel exhausts coughed black smoke into the morning air, the sound echoing off stone outcroppings and pine-covered slopes. Nightblade and Quicklock climbed to their positions on the overhanging branch, 12 feet above the roadway, balanced on wood thick as a man's torso. The pine's bark was rough against their palms, sticky with resin that would help maintain grip during the drop. Below them, the first truck rounded the hairpin curve. Canvas-covered bed packed with Korean prisoners, faces gaunt with malnutrition and industrial exhaustion. The driver downshifted, engine noise masking any sound from above. The second truck followed 30 seconds behind, diesel laboring against the mountain grade. Prisoners swayed with the vehicle's motion, packed shoulder to shoulder on wooden benches. Their eyes stared at nothing. Men broken by months of industrial slavery, spirits crushed beneath the Empire's machinery. Nightblade tensed as the third truck approached. Canvas top stretched tight over metal framework, sides rolled up for ventilation. He could see inside. 28 prisoners in threadbare work clothes, hands scarred from factory labor, faces hollow with starvation. The truck slowed for the hairpin turn. Engine noise peaked as the driver downshifted, transmission grinding under load. Diesel exhaust billowed upward, thick black smoke providing perfect concealment. Now, Nightblade dropped like falling shadow, 12 feet of controlled descent. His feet touched the truck bed's wooden floor with barely a whisper. Soft landing perfected through years of training. Quick lock followed a heartbeat later, materializing beside him with equal silence. The guards in the cab remained focused on navigating the treacherous mountain road. Through the rear window, Nightblade glimpsed the driver's profile. Cigarette dangling from his lips, hands tight on the wheel. The shotgun guard studied a clipboard, probably checking transport schedules. No reaction. No alarm. Perfect infiltration. Nightblade and Quick Lock found empty spaces on the rear bench, settling among prisoners who gave them barely a glance. These men had been ground down by months of forced labor, individualism beaten out of them by guards' canes and starvation rations. New faces meant nothing. Fresh suffering was just another day. The prisoner beside Nightblade looked Korean, maybe 40 years old, but aged beyond recognition. His hands showed burned scars from factory work, chemical burns that had healed badly without medical treatment. He stared at the truck bed's wooden slats, eyes focused on nothing, breathing shallow and mechanical. Another prisoner coughed wetly, lungs damaged by industrial fumes and metallic dust. His work uniform hung loose on a skeletal frame, cotton fabric stained with machine oil and old blood. The sound echoed in the canvas-covered space, mixing with engine noise and road vibration. Quick Lock tested his forged papers discreetly, fingers checking the document's placement in his uniform pocket. The truck lurched around another curve, prisoners swaying together like wheat in wind. No conversation, no eye contact, just broken men enduring another day of industrial servitude. The truck bed reeked of unwashed bodies, machine oil, and institutional despair. Chemical odors clung to the prisoners' clothes, evidence of their daily exposure to munitions production. Nightblade breathed through his mouth, fighting nausea as the diesel fumes mixed with human misery. Who would be insane enough to voluntarily enter this hell? The guards assumed no one. Prisoners escaped from camps, not into them. The logic provided perfect camouflage for two shadow warriors hiding among the Empire's industrial slaves. The convoy descended toward Hiroshima, carrying its cargo of human tools to another day of weapons production. Hidden among the counted and cataloged, Nightblade and Quick Lock rode toward their target, two uncounted ghosts in the Emperor's machine. Behind them, Shadow Dancer watched from her concealed position until the trucks disappeared around a bend. Only then did she begin her own descent toward the city and the dangerous masquerade that awaited. The convoy ground through Hiroshima's industrial district, diesel engines coughing black smoke between concrete buildings. Factory smokestacks rose like tombstones against the morning sky, belching chemical fumes that stained the air yellow-brown. The city's eastern quarter had been transformed into a sprawling weapons complex. Aircraft plants, munitions factories, steel foundries feeding the Empire's war machine. Nightblade caught his first glimpse of their destination through the truck's canvas opening. Factory Complex 7 dominated an entire city block. Massive concrete hangars connected by covered walkways, guard towers at each corner flying the rising sun. But these weren't ammunition bunkers. The buildings stretched too long, too wide for small arms production. Aircraft assembly, 0 fighters. The lead truck turned through chain-link gates topped with razor wire. Nightblade read the painted sign in Japanese characters. Mitsubishi Heavy Industries, authorized personnel only. Below it, a smaller sign warned of immediate execution for sabotage or escape attempts. Guard towers flanked the entrance, but only one was manned. A single sentry with a Type 38 rifle, head nodding with boredom. The other 3 towers stood empty, skeleton crews reflecting the Empire's confidence in prisoner compliance. After months of systematic brutalization, escape attempts had become academic exercises. The convoy rolled past the main assembly hangar, its doors open to reveal the skeletal framework of a 6M0 fighters in various stages of completion. Aluminum wings gleamed under industrial lighting. Engines hung from overhead cranes, waiting for installation. Women in blue factory uniforms, Japanese civilians earning war wages, worked alongside Korean prisoners, riveting aluminum sheets and installing control systems. The trucks stopped beside a low concrete building marked Prisoner Processing. Through its windows, Nightblade glimpsed clerks bent over ledgers, tracking production quotas and labor assignments. The administrative heart of industrial slavery, where human beings became inventory numbers. A sergeant emerged from the processing building, clipboard in hand, cigarette dangling from his lips. He'd supervised these morning deliveries for 18 months, watching the same broken faces arrive for the same grinding labor. Routine had made him careless. 30 prisoners arrived, 30 prisoners worked, 30 prisoners returned. The mathematics never changed. "Unload!" he barked in Japanese, not bothering to look at individual faces. "Assembly line 3 needs 12 bodies. Wing construction takes 10. Engine installation gets 8. The guards in the lead truck's cab climbed out, stretching muscles cramped from the mountain drive. The driver lit a fresh cigarette while his partner checked transport logs against Tanaka's clipboard. Paperwork mattered more than people. Forms filed correctly meant no questions from Tokyo administrators. Prisoners began climbing from the truck beds with mechanical obedience. 40 years of imperial discipline had taught them the consequences of hesitation or delay. They formed ragged lines beside the vehicles, heads down, hands clasped behind backs in submission posture. No head count, no roll call, no verification of identity. The sergeant gestured with his clipboard toward the assembly hangar. "Move them to their stations. Production quota increases 5% this week. Tokyo wants more fighters." The guards herded prisoners toward different factory entrances like cattle being sorted for slaughter. Wing construction workers toward Hangar 2, engine specialists toward the machine shops, assembly line laborers toward the main production floor where Zero fighters took shape beneath industrial lighting. Nightblade and Quicklock joined the flow toward assembly line 3, 2 more Korean faces among dozens of identical broken men. Their forged papers remained unexamined in uniform pockets. The guards' attention focused on maintaining movement, not verifying identity. Perfect infiltration into the heart of the Empire's aircraft production. The factory complex stretched around them like a concrete maze, each building dedicated to different aspects of Zero production. Aluminum fabrication, engine assembly, weapons installation, final testing. Inside the main assembly hangar, the din of industrial production swallowed individual voices. Rivet guns hammered aluminum sheets. Pneumatic tools hissed compressed air. Overhead cranes groaned under engine loads. Perfect acoustic cover for conversations that needed concealment. Nightblade positioned himself at a wing assembly station, hands moving through the motions of installing control cables while his eyes cataloged security patterns. Prisoner overseers carried bamboo canes, focused on production quotas. Factory guards wore khaki uniforms with sidearms, Type 14 Nambu pistols in leather holsters. But the interesting targets moved differently. Roving inspectors, quality control supervisors, men with clipboards and authorization badges who moved freely between buildings, checking production standards and delivery schedules. Their uniforms bore factory identification pins that opened doors throughout the complex. Quicklock had identified the same opportunity from his position near the engine installation bay. He caught Nightblade's eye across the factory floor, nodded once toward a quality inspector examining wing assemblies 30 feet away. The man worked alone, clipboard in hand, checking rivet patterns against technical specifications. Inspector Watanabe, Nightblade read the name tag, was methodical but predictable. He followed the same route every hour, inspecting the same stations in identical sequence. His clipboard contained production schedules, facility maps, even personnel rosters. Perfect access for locating their target among hundreds of workers. The inspector moved toward a storage alcove between assembly stations, checking his clipboard against serial numbers stenciled on aluminum wing sections. Isolated, screened from observation by stacked materials. Perfect killing ground. Nightblade drifted from his workstation during the shift supervisor's distraction with a production problem. Prisoners moving between assignments drew no attention. Factory workflow demanded constant repositioning of human resources. He slipped between towering stacks of wing components, following Watanabe into the storage area. The inspector bent over his clipboard, pencil scratching notes about wing tolerances. Professional focus that made him oblivious to approaching death. Nightblade moved with absolute silence, feet finding gaps between scattered rivets and metal shavings. One fluid motion. Left hand clamping over Watanabe's mouth, right hand driving up beneath the ribcage. The man's heart stopped before his brain registered the attack. No struggle, no sound. Just sudden transition from life to inventory shrinkage. Nightblade lowered the body behind stacked aluminum sheets, stripping the khaki uniform with practiced efficiency. Factory identification badge, clipboard, even the man's wristwatch, every detail that sold the disguise. The quality inspector's shoes were too small, but loosened laces made them wearable. The prisoner uniform disappeared into a toolbox filled with metal shavings. The body followed, buried beneath aluminum scraps that would hide decomposition odors until discovery became academic. By then, Inspector Watanabe would have begun searching for their target. Across the factory floor, Quicklock had identified his own target, a supply clerk moving between stock rooms with manifest sheets and authorization stamps. The man's route took him through a maintenance corridor connecting assembly lines, perfect isolation for elimination and replacement. The transformation took 12 minutes. Quicklock emerged from the maintenance area wearing the supply clerk's blue coveralls, identification badge prominent on his chest pocket. Manifest sheets provided perfect cover for movement throughout the complex, checking inventory, accessing personnel areas, locating specific workers among hundreds of Korean prisoners. 2 shadow warriors had become factory personnel, invisible within the Empire's industrial machinery. Inspector Watanabe and supply clerk Yoshida would continue their duties, but with new priorities, finding one particular Korean nobleman whose life was worth 3 ninjas and a mountain of corpses. The murdered men's bodies lay hidden beneath factory waste, identity theft complete. Nightblade adjusted his clipboard, checking the real Watanabe's personnel access against worker assignments. Perfect camouflage for a rescue mission disguised as routine inspection. Quicklock's manifests provided access to every stockroom, every personnel area, every administrative section within the complex. He caught Nightblade's eye across the factory floor, tapped his chest twice, the signal for separation. Time to divide their search. Nightblade headed toward the administrative building, clipboard providing perfect justification for his presence. The contract had seemed straightforward 6 months ago. Locate and extract Kim Dong-hwan, youngest son of the Kim clan of Gyeongju. Ancient Korean nobility with enough hidden gold to hire shadow warriors for what seemed like a simple rescue mission. The Kim family had last received word from Dong-hwan in a letter smuggled from a labor camp near Seoul. Then nothing. Silence that stretched through months of imperial relocations as forced Korean laborers disappeared into the empire's industrial machinery. The young nobleman had vanished into a system designed to erase identity, reduce human beings to production statistics. Finding him had become an obsession that carried Nightblade and his team across every prison camp in Korea, then into Japan itself as prisoner transports moved Korean workers to fuel the homeland's war production. Dozens of facilities searched, hundreds of faces examined, thousands of dead ends. The administrative building's entrance bore the usual warnings in Japanese: authorized personnel only, violation punishable by death. Nightblade's stolen credentials opened the door without question. Inside, clerks bent over ledgers tracking human inventory with mechanical precision. He found the personnel office on the 2nd floor, filing cabinets stretching floor to ceiling along 3 walls. Current worker assignments, transfer records, disciplinary actions, the bureaucratic skeleton of industrial slavery. If Kim Dong-hwan worked in this facility, his name would be buried somewhere in these files. Meanwhile, Quicklock descended to the basement storage area, supply manifests providing access to long-term record-keeping. The Empire documented everything, including failure. If Kim Dong-hwan had died in custody, his death would be recorded with the same administrative precision that tracked aluminum inventory. The basement reeked of mold and neglect. Cardboard boxes stacked to the ceiling, each labeled with facility codes and date ranges. Years of accumulated paperwork moldering in bureaucratic purgatory. Death certificates, medical reports, disposition of remains, the Empire's careful accounting of human wastage. Quicklock began methodically searching boxes marked with dates corresponding to Kim Dong-hwan's disappearance. The Korean gold that funded this mission had bought loyalty from dozens of informants, but reliable intelligence remained elusive. Too many prisoners, too many camps, too many ways for one nobleman's son to vanish without trace. The Kim clan's payment had been generous, enough golden dragons to fund operations for years. But honor demanded completion, not just payment. The contract would be fulfilled. If he lived, they would find him. If he was dead, they would carry word back to his family with the dignity he deserved. Either way, the mission that had consumed months of their lives was approaching its conclusion. The Kim clan's gold had purchased the finest killers in Asia. Now those killers would discover whether their target was among the living or had joined the countless dead feeding Japan's industrial appetite. 2 days of methodical searching revealed how thoroughly the imperial war machine had degraded. Guards performed their duties with mechanical indifference, eyes focused on shift rotations rather than security protocols. The Empire's finest soldiers lay dead on Pacific Islands or dying in hospital ships. What remained were clerks in uniform, going through motions while awaiting inevitable defeat. Nightblade moved through administrative areas with impunity, Inspector Watanabe's credentials opening every door. File cabinets surrendered their secrets to patient examination. Personnel rosters, transfer orders, medical reports. The bureaucratic archaeology of industrial slavery spread across dozens of folders. Quicklock's basement searches proved equally productive. The Empire's obsession with documentation meant every death was recorded, every transfer logged, every prisoner movement tracked with Germanic precision. If Kim Dong-hwan had died, the paperwork would exist. If he lived, the trail would lead somewhere. The guards who should have questioned their presence instead offered assistance. Factory security had become a job, not a calling. Men counted hours until shift change, not potential threats to imperial production. War weariness had replaced vigilance with routine compliance. On the evening of August 5th, Quicklock found what they'd searched 6 months to discover. Buried in a transfer manifest dated 4 months earlier. Kim Dong-hwan, age 23, skilled machinist, transferred from Pusan Labor Facility to Complex 7, Workshop C12. Not dead. Working. The record included medical notes. Prisoner exhibits advanced technical knowledge, assigned to precision engine work. Productivity excellent, requires minimal supervision. Kim Dong-hwan had survived by making himself valuable, skilled enough to avoid the killing labor that consumed most prisoners. Nightblade received the signal during evening shift change. 3 taps on a water pipe in the administrative building's basement. The code they'd used across a dozen infiltrations. Target located. Visual confirmation required. Workshop C12 occupied the eastern corner of the main assembly building, separated from general production areas by wire mesh barriers. Through the gaps, Nightblade could see Korean prisoners hunched over workbenches, assembling engine components under the supervision of a single Japanese foreman who spent more time reading newspapers than watching workers. There. 3rd workbench from the left. Young Korean male, early 20s, hands moving with the precision that came from months of forced expertise. His face was gaunt from prison rations, but the bone structure remained aristocratic. High cheekbones, intelligent eyes, the bearing that centuries of noble breeding couldn't completely erase. Nightblade moved closer, pretending to inspect quality control documentation while memorizing every detail. The prisoner's work clothes bore the stenciled number 7734, but underneath the industrial dehumanization, traces of education showed through. The way he held tools, the efficiency of his movements, the quick glances that cataloged information rather than simply enduring. At precisely 21:30 hours, during the shift foreman's cigarette break, Nightblade approached the wire barrier. The young Korean looked up from his work, eyes meeting those of the quality inspector who didn't belong. Kim Dong-hwan of Gyeongju, Nightblade said quietly in Japanese, voice barely audible over factory noise. The prisoner's hands stilled on his tools. Recognition flickered across features schooled by months of survival to show nothing. A slight nod. Confirmation that 6 months of searching had finally reached its target. Your family sends greetings, Nightblade continued. They have not forgotten. Kim Dong-hwan's eyes filled with tears he couldn't allow to fall. Not here. Not under the foreman's potential observation. But his lips moved in a single, silent phrase. Honor endures. The ancient motto of the Kim clan of Gyeongju. Words spoken at every family gathering, carved into ancestral tablets, whispered by children learning their heritage. Proof beyond doubt that this broken prisoner remained the nobleman they'd been contracted to rescue. Visual contact confirmed. Identity verified. The contract that had consumed half a year of shadow warfare was finally approaching completion. Kim Dong-hwan lived, worked, and would soon be free. Shadow Dancer sat on the shrine's stone steps, watching the sun climb over Hiroshima's sprawling industrial district. The morning air carried the scent of incense from dawn prayers mixing with factory smoke from the aircraft plants. From her elevated position, the entire city spread before her like a detailed map. Residential districts with their tile roofs gleaming, the Aoi Bridge crossing the Ota River, children already walking to school despite the early hour. She wondered when the war would finally end. American bombers had reduced other cities to ash, but Hiroshima remained largely untouched. Some said the Americans were saving it for a special purpose. Others claimed it held no strategic value worth the fuel for bombing runs. Shadow Dancer preferred not to speculate. Her role was observation, not prophecy. The familiar scent reached her first, the reek of human filth. The camp smell still clung to Nightblade's clothing. There'd been no time to thoroughly wash. She turned to see 3 figures approaching through the morning mist. Nightblade and Quicklock had traded their stolen factory uniforms for their stashed civilian clothes, dark trousers and white shirts that made them look like office workers heading to morning shifts. Between them walked a young Korean man, gaunt from months of industrial slavery, but carrying himself with unmistakable nobility. Kim Dong-hwan of Gyeongju, the prize they'd spent 6 months hunting across occupied territories. His clothes were factory issue, but his bearing remained aristocratic despite everything the Empire had done to break him. Quicklock, Nightblade said quietly. Get Kim changed. Get him cleaned up, fed, ready for extraction. Quicklock nodded, understanding the need for private reunion between husband and wife. He guided Kim down the shrine steps toward the boarding house in Ujina district, their footsteps fading into morning city sounds. Nightblade moved to Shadow Dancer's side, arms encircling her waist as she leaned back against his chest. For a moment, they were simply 2 people watching sunrise over a city that didn't know it was about to die. The mission was complete. 6 months of searching, infiltration, and careful planning had succeeded. Kim Dong-hwan was free. This contract would change everything. The Kim clan's gold was merely the beginning. Completing an impossible rescue from the heart of the Empire would elevate Nightblade's standing within the Arashikage. Recognition from the Hard Master himself. Perhaps even elevation to clan leadership. Perhaps heirs. Honor endures, Shadow Dancer whispered, quoting the clan motto that had confirmed their target's identity. As does love, Nightblade replied, pressing his lips to her hair. His eyes tracked movement across the sky, a lone aircraft at impossible altitude, silver speck against blue morning. Too high for fighters, too solitary for bombing formation. Strange. Shadow Dancer turned in his arms, face tilted up for the kiss they'd stolen 2 days ago beneath the pine tree. Her eyes closed as their lips met, blocking out everything but the warmth of his embrace and the knowledge that their impossible mission was. The sky ignited. Light beyond description, beyond comprehension, beyond anything that should exist on Earth. For one impossible instant, Shadow Dancer saw every detail of Nightblade's face illuminated by nuclear fire. His eyes widening in recognition of something no human was meant to witness, lips forming her name as cosmic forces rewrote the fundamental nature of reality. The shockwave hit like a physical wall. Nightblade felt Shadow Dancer's body begin to disintegrate in his arms, flesh turning to ash, bones to powder, her final breath escaping as atomic wind. He tried to hold her together, but she crumbled through his fingers like sand, her essence scattered by forces that turned matter into memory. The blast hurled him backward across the shrine's stone courtyard, his body tumbling through superheated air until he crashed into the temple's stone fountain. Ancient granite cracked under the impact. Water boiled instantly, steam erupting around him as he sank beneath the surface. Debris rained from the shrine's roof as the building shuddered on its foundations. The sound came last, not heard but felt, a physical pressure that compressed his chest and set his teeth rattling. Thunder magnified beyond imagination, the death cry of atoms splitting apart, the birth scream of a new age. Hiroshima was disappearing beneath an expanding dome of annihilation, and Shadow Dancer was gone forever. Thank you for listening to this audiobook. I'm Thomas Richter, and it's been an honor to share this story with you. If you're ready for your next mission, we've got a full arsenal of series waiting for you on this platform. Each one is locked and loaded with the kind of stories that keep you pressing forward no matter what. For those who march to the beat of our soundtrack, all of our music is deployed across every major streaming platform: Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, you name it. Just search for Springfield Syndrome or the audiobook title to add it to your playlist. Your support keeps us in the fight, and we'd be grateful if you'd drop us a review wherever you grab this audiobook. Your feedback is our intel. It helps us improve our operations and helps other listeners find their next objective. Stay strong, stay sharp, and remember, the only easy day was yesterday. This is Thomas Richter, signing off.